among the Jewish voters, are they concerned?
Look, there's going to be a private and personal decision made by Michigan's Jewish community.
So let's further discuss this ridiculous unity campaign that the Democrat establishment is trying to push, because they're now doing the exact same thing in Michigan, where after claiming to have fought this civil war with the communists, suddenly the Democrat establishment, as usual, as they always do, by the way, proceeds to sweep it up, grovel, and ultimately run cover for the DSA crowd, because that's who they really serve. And by the way, that's who really controls the Democrat Party. They are the commies. You want to know who's in power? Look to who, for example, you can't criticize, whose will is being reflected in all major decisions. We know the answer to that question. And I find that to be very telling, that every single time the fence-sitting Democrat establishment is forced to truly pick a side between the communists and the supposed old-school moderate liberals in their party, they choose the commies every single time. Because, of course, we've long theorized that really, in many ways, this whole party civil war is actually fake. It's largely kayfabe. It really boils down to a lot of more personal power politics, such as who should be the Senate leader and what should our rhetoric be on the campaign trail, for example, rather than actually substantive disagreements on policy. Which we proved in the last video, right? Even the Democrat establishment guy who just won the nomination in Wisconsin goes out there and says, Francesca Hong and I agree on almost every single policy. We just have different approaches for getting there. Oh, so you guys are both ultimately communists at the end of the day. And this whole idea of even a Democrat establishment is not actually all that real. Well, maybe that's the entire point. But apparently, this is now also going on over in Michigan, where, of course, Haley Stevens, the establishment Democrat you may remember who ran against Abdullah al-Sayed in that Senate primary, is now being kind of dragged out of the shed she was hiding in or whatever, and now proceeding to do sort of this national media tour to defend al-Sayed and make it very clear, guys, I support al-Sayed. And you have to wonder, why is she doing that? Isn't this the same person, by the way, that al-Sayed surrogates were calling Islamophobic and racist about 2 seconds ago? Where are your guts? Where is your integrity? Well, let me remind people, we've seen this story before. It was the same situation with Kathy Hochul. Remember that? She thought, oh, let me go out and grovel to the DSA and surely they'll appreciate me. She goes out on that stage and got massively booed out of the arena. Anyone recall when that happened? Well, there is a reason, though, why they're doing this, is that these DSA candidates, as we probably know, having just watched the election results in both Michigan and Wisconsin, are in massive trouble. I mean, they probably were expecting they were going to run away with it, right? Again, they were winning the polls there by double digits. And in reality, what we learned, especially ever since election night, is that however large it is, this boycott movement is actually real. We displayed proof of that, which is essentially to say, there are at least some Democrat voters who supported Haley Stevens who will not support al-Sayed. They're going to boycott or even vote Mike Rogers in the election because they're not down with the socialist commie turn of the party. Of course, we also well know that among independent voters, especially in a swing state where those matter, he is massively underwater. And so basically what is now happening is, yes, the DSA facing massive problems in November. Here's the thing, though, and here's what I find to be so telling again. If you're the Democrat establishment, and you're truly not wanting to see these characters take over the party, and you have principled stands against that stuff, wouldn't you think that al-Sayed is basically your free sacrificial lamb in a sense, right? Let him lose, right? And permanently discredit him. No, instead, in both the case of al-Sayed and even Francesca Hong, no, it's the damage control. They're publicly going on TV and saying they want unity with the DSA and they actually agree with the DSA. And so in that sense, ultimately, you can say that the party civil war is already over. But that said, this is again what? All a big sweeping up attempt, because those calls by old school liberals, whatever, these types of Democrats to boycott this stuff is indeed real. And how's the Democrat establishment very pathetically handling it? Let's run you through this chronicle today as it pertains especially to al-Sayed and this Senate race. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with that said, What is currently causing some panic for Democrats over in Michigan? Well, it's not just the fact that there are indeed swaths of voters who voted for Haley Stevens but don't want to vote for Al-Sayed. We even though have Democrat figures, like for example here, the former Jill Biden press secretary, Michael LaRosa, came out today and confirmed he will actually be backing Republican Mike Rogers over Abdul Rahman Mohammed Al-Sayed, basically here saying, look, I'm going to be the one actual supposed liberal or whatever who takes a principled, consistent stand. Take a listen.
Because you put this out on X on Sunday, and I said, get Michael on the air. You're talking about, you said that you're supporting Mike Rogers in Michigan instead of Abdul Rahman Al-Sayed. And you said this: I refuse to defend or support anyone with an SS Totenkopf tattoo simply because they had a D next to their name. I won't defend or support anyone who's too cowardly to stand up to extremists who think the mother of my best friend, who jumped from 95 stories because the alternative was worse, deserved what happened to her. Yet there are so many Democrats who are willing to give these folks a pass just because, hey, it's all about getting elected.
Look,
it's not about principle.
I want the Democrats to win. I think they're going to win the Senate. I think they're going to win the House. I want Chuck Schumer and Brian Schatz to be the next majority leaders. I want to do it without Al-Sayed. And that can be done. But this isn't what I signed up for. Totenkopf and SS and defending it and then defending. And Hassan Piker is just not the leader of my party. And it's okay for Democrats to say that. My old boss, Chris Matthews, was on TV this morning saying Democrats just need to do the hard part for politicians, which is sometimes standing up to your friends.
Right.
Having a spine. All right, gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, well, obviously the idea of the Democrat Party actually having a spine is ludicrous, but I would go one step further. I would say that in order to have a spine or stand up to something, you have to actually oppose that thing, right? That's what comes first. Before you publicly speak out, you have to have the genuine conviction that that thing is wrong. And I think what we've clearly established by listening to top members of Democrat leadership, they don't actually think this stuff is wrong at all. As a matter of fact, in principle, they rather support it. Their whole contention is, oh, but maybe we won't win the election by saying that. Let's lie to the American people in a different way, which is exactly why, by the way, you will never hear any major Democrats these days going out explicitly and saying socialism or communism are wrong. As a matter of fact, that petition, I don't know if you saw this story, was recently floated around Congress, right? Just sign a pledge saying, we're not socialist, socialism is bad. Only 10 Democrats in the entire House, okay? There are hundreds of Democrats. Only 10 of them even were willing to sign that pledge. Why? Because at the end of the day, you know, you can claim you're just scared of the DSA, but which, by the way, is not a virtue, right? Cowardice is not a good thing. But even then, I'm going to take that one step further. Do you actually even disagree with the DSA, or is this whole civil war entirely fake? Well, what's hard to, of course, deny on the flip side is while the Democrat Party practices at best cowardice and at worst pure malice because they actually are all communists, it's still hard to deny that while that might be one guy on Fox News, this is indeed a real movement. Again, the election results in Michigan bared that out. You don't have to take my word or his word for it. We can just look to that electoral map where Al-Sayed gets destroyed in working class areas. This is Michigan, buddy. Gets destroyed even among black voters. You're a Democrat, buddy. Only basically runs up the margin among college towns and thinks that's going to be enough to carry him in the election. Obviously, that's not true. This is a swing state. And especially in a swing state, when socialism is polling at the best, at best for them, minus 17 among independent voters, you're in for a very bad situation. And on the flip side, it does at least appear as if some of these disaffected old school normie liberals are in some ways trying to do something to stand up. For example, you can see here Third Way.
We are preparing for the next war that is coming, said Jonathan Cohen, the president of Third Way, a leading centrist Democratic group, revealing to the New York Times a new $15 million effort between now and 2028 to discredit the Democratic Socialism.
Now, look, I think two things can be true at the same time. While I respect what people like this are trying to do, and if you're a liberal who genuinely speaks out against these people, it does take some courage, especially on your side. I get that. And while I don't deny that there are indeed registered Democrat voters who feel uncomfortable about the current direction of their party, I would say to both of these entities, it's arguably much too late for that. You wanted to stop this, you stopped it about 10 years ago. But we're now at a position where even looking to your so-called establishment, your party leadership, they're telling you how they really feel. For example, we have this recent soundbite of Adam Schiff responding to welcoming all of these communists and socialists into the Democrat Party, which, keep in mind, doesn't just mean, certain crazy ideas about economics. It means the average Hassan Piker quote, right? It means political violence. It means America deserved 9/11. It means blanketly hating and calling for the erasure of white people, canceling Thanksgiving, abolishing the police, just to name a few. There are much more. And his response to that is, well, that's the big tent party. That's what the Democrat establishment is saying. They're saying these are the type of people who belong in our big tent, which, by the way, even from Adam Schiff, is a dishonest characterization of it, because it's not just about the big tent. It's the people they're literally putting in charge and allowing them to make decisions. So do keep that in mind as well. So here's the thing. Here's why I say the communists have already won the party civil war, even regardless of what kind of candidate, for example, Democrats choose in a particular primary, is because you can see they already have the Democrat establishment by the you-know-what. The changing of, or the replacing of Chuck Schumer or something in a Senate primary or in a leadership race, that's just a mere formality. These people are already in charge. And so if you are a truly moderate liberal who doesn't like the socialism, I don't know, but I don't know if there's a home for you in the Democrat Party, frankly, at all. I'm just saying.
Democratic Party, and I think if we want to be in the majority, we're going to have to be a big tent party. I would much rather have that diversity in our party than have it outside the party. I don't think you can extrapolate too much from the results because they're all over the map.
Oh, and how utterly pathetic, by the way. Because if anything, the Democrat establishment just learned that the DSA takeover is actually not inevitable. That's what these two elections just showed us. These people are massively underwater. They're not popular. There is actually a market for quote unquote more normal Democrats to still be in charge. But basically Adam Schiff, Chuck Schumer, and all these characters are saying, oh yeah, we could save the ship, at least for ourselves, but that's too much work. Let's just let the communist mob all come for us. Whatever. It's like being the captain of the Titanic and seeing the iceberg beforehand and just saying, I don't want to steer today. Like, what a loser you are. Like, how lazy are you, right? Like, there is actually the political capital to make a stand. They're just refusing to do it. But, when that's your party leadership, again, I'll repeat, the communists have already won. It really is that simple. Of course, let's now discuss Haley Stevens. Let's remember, this was the establishment opponent of Abdul al-Sayed. Of course, we saw massive calls. We showed you those interviews from her supporters going out and stating, well, I'm not comfortable voting al-Sayed. In fact, I may end up voting for Mike Rogers because this is Michigan. This is a battleground state. I'm an old school moderate Democrat. I don't want to see this happen. And what has Haley Stevens proceeded to do? Go on TV and quite ambiguously, but still proceed to run a bunch of damage control for al-Sayed, because once again, this is all kayfabe. The establishment will always bow to the communist mob at the end of the day, and that even includes the people who they were just calling, the socialists, I should say, were just calling Islamophobic and racist 2 seconds ago. Take a listen.
Will you, Haley Stevens, campaign right alongside and actively and visibly and repetitively with Abdul al-Sayed?
Well, I think I just told you I was already campaigning. I had. Well, you're talking about whatever he wants me to do. You know what I mean? Look, I'm a sitting congresswoman, 3, months left or so in the term. We got major elections going on. I'm going to be a part of it. They know look, he's good with the rallies. All right. The rallies are a big part of it. I do a lot of meet and greets, with the small business owners. I spend a ton of time with Black-owned businesses.
Yep. So in her own words, whatever he wants her to do, that being Abdul al-Sayed, she's willing to go out and help, which almost implies it's not even an issue of necessity or something. She's volunteering herself to go out and help al-Sayed, and the implication from hearing all of this is quite hilariously. Here's what's even funnier. Haley Stevens is almost sitting there begging to be involved, and guess who has not called her, it sounds like here? Al-Sayed, right? The establishment Democrat barely lost. Now she wants to be included. She wants to be part of the cool kids club. She's saying, hey, communists, can I come to your thing? And they're just ignoring her. They're giving her the cold shoulder. Take a listen.
Just to be very clear, but you're not going tonight. You're not going to be at the Unity rally?
Well, I'm not. This is for the ticket.
I mean, if they, it's okay. I'm supporting them. I'm all happy to be here. I just told you I'm at there's no drama. Okay. I know you want the drama. I don't have drama. I'm a proud Democrat. I told them they want, I'm going to go do whatever with the party. I'm a soldier. I was a door knocker in 06. I door knocked in the early 2000s. Look, it's not about that. This is about supporting our awesome Democratic candidates.
Just how pathetic. You trot yourself out to do this whole media tour in order to defend him and run cover for him, and it sounds like they don't even give you the call. Pretty funny. Of course, there are major questions for Haley Stevens to be suddenly loving al-Sayed here that need to be asked, and CNN asked one of them today, considering Israel and, Jewish people were this big central divide between al-Sayed and, Stevens on the campaign trail. They asked her today, what do you say to the Jewish voters who are concerned about al-Sayed? Take a listen to their response.
And among the Jewish voters, are they concerned?
Look, there's going to be a private and personal decision made by Michigan's Jewish community. I deeply respect and cherish the relationship that I have with Michigan's Jewish population. I am a Zionist Democrat. I'm saying that live on CNN. I'm standing by the Jewish community. They're going to have, it's not just the Senate seat, but we got to governor's race and attorney general, secretary of state, these congressional races, Jeremy Moss.
Yeah, well, as usual, great way to completely dodge the question and sweep it under the rug. We look forward to finding out what Haley Stevens' approval rating among Zionist Jewish Democrats in Michigan will be going forward. But still, regardless, my message to those people, to Jewish Zionist Democrats, would be the exact same as it is to all other disaffected sections of the Democrat Party, which is that, hey, first of all, people kind of warned you was going in this direction, but we're not here to do the dunking. Ultimately, this is the party now. Even the leaders you thought were going to stop the radical takeover are effectively selling you out. And so it clearly is inevitable these people are going to take over. Therefore, make your political choices accordingly, is all I can say about that. I think one of the messages, among others, I gave the night Mamdani won was specifically, when we were breaking down, for example, obviously Mamdani's not super popular among the Jewish community of New York City, which historically is a very heavily Democrat voting bloc, right? Jewish people on average are one of the more liberal-leaning ethnic groups in all of America. A lot of that ties back to the old Northeast and sort of the Democrat political machines and all that stuff, but that stuff is all still there, right? And, we kind of pointed out that this is the double-edged sword, is that while, for example, en masse, a lot of them were supporting the Democrat mass immigration agenda for many years, saying diversity is our strength and all this, one of many things we've tried to warn various different Democrats of is that, hey, you're not just importing people from parts of the world that are fundamentally illiberal and this is not going to go well for Western society, but especially, right, for Jews, you're importing a bunch of people from parts of the world that are genuinely not just anti-Israel, but actually anti-Semitic, right? Not in a sense that we're going to throw that out as a buzzword for people we disagree with. No, where that's a very normal belief they have out there. And a bunch of them, for example, ended up historically in places like Dearborn, Michigan, and you wonder how you got Abdul al-Sayed, where there you go. And the reason, for example, I bring that up is because, and this is the same thing we said when Mamdani won, for years you look at, for example, a liberal-leaning kind of, Jewish advocacy, anti-Semitism group like the ADL. Historically, who has the ADL been targeting for decades? The supposed far right, right? They, by the way, have attacked Elon Musk, I believe Turning Point USA and stuff like that, if I'm not mistaken. This is a long-standing thing. And one of their historic big criticisms was, for example, if you oppose mass immigration, what the ADL used to say is, that it makes you anti-Semitic, right? That's this white supremacist dog whistle or whatever. And that was the big thing, right? The big threat to Jewish people, according to Jewish liberals, is the white supremacists, is the far right. And we say that because look what's happening right now, right? The very immigration that the supposed far right was trying to warn you about. They were trying to stop. You were slandering them, right? How many people has the ADL called to censor, debank, deplatform, all that stuff throughout the years, especially peak woke, you know, for example, largely because, for example, they had, let's say, an anti-immigration stance. And then now we come to 2026, where that very immigration, now you have, for example, Jewish Democrats freaking out and saying, oh, how do we have Abdul al-Sayed in you know, at least winning Democrat nominations? I thought the Democrat Party is historically full of, it's like a pro-Jewish party, right? It's a pro-Israel party, all that stuff. What happened? That's exactly what happened, folks, you know? So keep in mind, on one hand, again, that's another thing where it's like, we tried to warn you, but at the same time, it's kind of late to reverse that trend now, right? As we've already sort of established, Third World has already won the war against woke. This is the new Democrat Party. It's the Third World Communist Party, and all their politics are going to gradually sort of reflect all of that. Party leadership won't do anything to stop it. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, sure, if you're a disaffected liberal Democrat of any origin, right, Jewish, not Jewish, whatever, just do keep that in mind. You know, if you didn't want the party to come to this, I respect that, I guess, but it's kind of too late for that, you know? This is what's happened. This is where it is. And maybe some of your focus throughout the years, especially talking to a group like the ADL, has been misguided, right? It's been misdirected. You were missing the real problem right in front of you, and now it's coming back to bite you. What else can we say? But, you know, you don't have to vote for it. I'm just going to say that. I'm not even saying you have to vote Republican. You don't have to vote for him, though. We'll see what happens. That said, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.